Lady Saki, I laugh up the place.
Come on, what are you saying, Geese?
Nice to meet you.
Big up,
I
man.
believe I've seen you before on
YouTube.
Yeah, on that guy Content Over Everything.
This is Content Over Everything live now, B.
But you're not the same guy as the one who was on it last time. Where's he gone?
He's right there still. He's talking to someone else, man.
So how's it going?
I'm not such a nice guy then.
How do you feel the past few months?
Hey, wavy ones,
like
big up Shani.
Been a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Oh, you're funky.
I've always wanted to ask that, and I want to honest opinion. Like, how does it look
we don't
from the
big up nobody, man, on this
lots
channel.
of
You get me?
different people with lots of different
Lion
opinions. But
Paul,
what I
come
will
on.
say is that anyone who comes here willing to speak their mind is to be respected. Now, of course,
J Boogie,
you know,
Mighty,
some
come on,
people,
fire one.
I didn't know this, but it turns out guiding a new generation gang, you're promoting a traditional family model, and that seemed to be at odds with some people who weren't necessarily about the traditional family model. So there's always this sort of like head-butting and exchange of ideas. But it's interesting to basically see characters like yourself and I forget some of the other names, but then there are sort of like more dickhead types, like some of the Ali Dawa, whatever he's called, and those kind of people. It's like people who want to do something positive rather than people who just want to self-aggrandize,
I don't know what that is,
shine from their videos, like edit stuff, and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because that guy Tan seemed to really put, what would you say, like, he seemed to be like a cat amongst the pigeons. Like, he triggered absolutely everyone. And what's interesting is that it's meant to be about freedom of speech, right? So even if you don't agree with what he's saying, in a sense, you've got to let the guy be a hateful racist if he wants, because that's kind of the vibe of here for the past 100 years. So it's like you can not subscribe to his worldview, you can say, I disagree with you. But when you're trying to like silence people, and that's kind of what I think is a bit disappointing, is the sort of people who want to silence each other through, you know, if I'm having to be like you, I don't know what you're saying, and I'm trying to scare you for not saying it. I think, Jesus Christ, you're a violent individual. Like, learn to talk without.
Yeah, but I think what you lot
I'll type for a few, word bars.
And there's people that go out of their way to antagonize people.
Yeah.
So it's like if Tan was having a conversation, even the Banksy thing, I looked at it and it looked really bad. But he was going out of his way online during the week to antagonize people. And then it comes in the park and then that whole energy's there. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think that...
But you know what, on an aside, one thing that I would be really interested in bringing to the park is basically the vibe of medical marijuana, because I really hate it when anyone basically tries to call out whether it's you or someone else for responsible use of a very safe drug, and then they basically start... Yeah, exactly. And then they want to try and make out like these pejorative terms, like you're into drugs
and the ganja woman.
No, medical marijuana. It's all about medical marijuana. Cannabis is clearly medicinal. This is what I do, a medicinal cannabis researcher. So I basically...
I'll definitely make a link with you, because I always want to...
Well, how would one get hold of you? Do you have numbers? Or
obviously don't say your details out loud because we're recording live.
I'm not going to say my details.
Man's not going to be here. Man's not going to be here for...
man. What are you saying, man?
You know what man's going to do? I don't see you a lot. Let's come back with the knowledge.
But I'm here, man. I'm a nighttime guy. You get me there?
Okay, that's
what
I always see you
dark. I'm in a dark store.
Inshallah, you'll come to Islam,
innit?
Inshallah.
Never. Say nothing, innit?
Hey, come. For months, man's gonna get the knowledge at watch. Man's come back.
Go get your knowledge, blood. And when you come back, start rolling with Shamsi. When you get back here, roll with Shamsi and Adwa, blood. Yeah? Roll round with them like gang. Do that gang thing. Do righteous gang. Do righteous gang.
Hey, you see when I come back to the park, yeah? From when I come to the park, yeah, watch. You man are gonna see, man. Inshallah, yeah. That man's gonna stick with Shamsi and that stuff. Because obviously, there's gonna be 73 sects in the Amma, yeah? And one of them is gonna be permitted Jannah, innit? And that is, and obviously, that is the one who's on the, you get me, fam? Yeah, hey, big of any, no hard feelings. You know like that.
Anyone come talk to me how you try to talk to me, bro, and it's that, you know, like that. It's not, it doesn't matter.
A few people saying they love weed, man.
People saying they love weed, and they should, because every human has got an endocannabinoid system, right? So it's designed for you.
Hey, big up Mrs. Ultra as well, yeah? Come on.
The CBD, THC, other
Mrs. Ultra, her, your aunties in the place.
All of it.
Yeah, so you are the boss.
Yeah. What else can we
so
say? Yeah,
once
tinctures,
they finish,
oils, edibles.
Once they finish, we'll get on to a little Q&A about some your ganja research.
All right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm kind of off with my friend, but I could be up for that or another time.
How do you feel about that?
I wasn't listening to that, sorry.
So,
to figure out why
a Q&A on ganja research. Are you in a rush?
A Q&A, yeah?
Q&A on ganja research.
Oh no, I'm well ready for it. We both work in medical cannabis research and extract technology. So yeah, we can have a Q&A session any time of the day.
Fucking
we
beautiful.
Discuss, educate people on the endocannabinoid system, the receptors, the uses, the values.
So and anyone
how
who's
do you get to be
the
like
plants,
a weed tester? Can you be? Is there such job as a weed tester? Can you get paid to smoke weed?
Not in the UK, but yeah, you can in the US.
Well, you can create your own job. You can canvass for medical cannabis. You can you can raise some money. You can put it towards some research. You can propose projects to universities.
Right. How much people in the chat? Press 1 if you'd like to get paid to smoke weed.
Yeah, I mean, everyone would love to get paid to smoke
well, look,
weed.
there's always some loser rapper who's like got too much fame at the moment, trying to like get some dude to roll his spliffs and whatever for $600 a week, or there's always some like bullshit guy. But that's not a real smoking.
We need to keep this discussion at a high level and not worry too much about all the little details of would you get paid to do this, would you get paid to do that, because we're 15, 20 years behind California right now. They've legalized cannabis in 1996. We are only now starting to understand what the benefits are in the UK. And when we have 420 over here, I see a bunch of kids leaving whole trail of trash.
CBD is great, but if you don't have some THC with your CBD, you're missing out, right?
Yeah, we need to educate.
And you can get this hemp CBD in the shops, and that's great. But then you have to have a little bit of THC to get the synergies to activate it. So research into that. Adding the CBD to the THC, and similarly adding the THC to the CBD. Both ways. Don't leave them out.
Big up Mrs. Ultra, man. Come on.
Landrace genetics,
loving the family.
Hybrid high CBD strains, all of this stuff is important to spread the word. But yeah, like we need to embrace a different culture here, most importantly. And we don't see that happening soon, but slowly. When it's good weather, like 420 this summer just gone. Amazing energy. We need more of this, And we need more people like canvassing actively, like United Patients Alliance.
Once again,
people like this, really spreading the word fully. What do you think?
I agree. Any questions? What are the questions?
Yeah. Anyone got any questions?
Any questions
for these guys?
Smells of
basically like. So like. What?
You see my hair?
People keep trying to say, is there any way that you could die from smoking weed?
No, because you don't have any cannabinoid receptors in your heart, so it's impossible to overdose on weed. Next question.
The only way you can die from weed is if
it falls on
100 kilos of weed hits you on your head.
If a big bale of weed falls out of one of those CIA planes as they smuggle drugs around the globe, that will kill you. But otherwise, weed is never going to kill you because it doesn't have any receptors in your heart, so you'll never get cardiac arrest. So you can get cannabis toxicity if you ingest too much. You might kind of feel a bit awkward or paranoid or have some crazy being on
big up lady in the Velle.
What? Big up lady?
No, I'm reading the comments.
Yeah, basically you can't die from weed.
Yeah.
Whereas most other drugs you can. So that's even why it's a great medicine, right? Because
mention the old study of why people
can you ever get addicted to weed?
So you can get psychologically addicted to anything. Those who do develop cannabis dependency, it's so less, shall we say, detrimental to your health than, for instance, if you were to pick up a opiate dependency as a result of being prescribed those, that it should be a frontline medication. You shouldn't have, so this medical cannabis thing that happened the 1st of November, it's like once you've exhausted all other treatment options, then you can try cannabis. That's clearly not the right approach. You should be able to try cannabis first.
That you something else.
Yeah, we're asking him some ganja questions.
That's
okay.
Go
on, jump in though.
Yeah, go on, I'm listening.
Like, what, you got any questions?
That's the medical marijuana guy right there.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, man. Like, obviously, I was asking him, like, obviously, can you die from weed? And he said, I knew the answer still, but I was just, really, it's just for clarity for people that don't know.
You can die from weed, yeah? A pound of weed, yeah, but you can't smoke it to die from it. You have to drop it on someone's head.
That's what he said, man.
Oh, he said the same thing.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, man.
I ain't gonna use that one again. That's still.
Yeah, man. What else, man?
You know when you drop a still, you should have dropped me halfway through, like you shouldn't even let me do
that. I mean, there's a wealth of literature. It's been very well elucidated in the academic journals. if you have any issue to do with health, clearly your immune system is going to govern that. If you look into CB1 and CB2 receptors, your immune system basically has these receptors all over it, and it helps modulate health, illness, disease. So pretty much if you're ill, you need cannabinoids. And a very one of Britain's foremost preeminent scientists a few weeks ago, I was having a chat with him, and he was estimating that maybe up to 60% of NHS medicines could be replaced by cannabinoid therapeutics. So given that the NHS spends about 20 billion a year, you're looking at about 12 billion quid of pharma products.
Everyone's asking if you can drop a pound of weed on them. Can you drop a pound of weed on me, please?
Hey, you go to South Africa, we can drop as many pounds of weed on you as you like. Here in
drop a pound of
what strains do you want? What, Kush, Haze, what do you want? Yeah, hemp. You want some hemp
seeds? Get a shout out. What pound of strain do you want dropped?
Yeah,
and where do you want it dropped?
Hey, big up Mrs. Ultra Funky as well. I hope you like the flowers that Mr. Ultra Funky sent you. Come on, Mr. Ultra Funky. You're making us do your work today, innit?
So yeah, look, this is it. Medical marijuana genetics. This is a CBD dominant seed bank. All the seeds have a good level, if not 1-to-1, 20-to-1 seeds. You need some CBD in your cannabis. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Even if you're getting that 20% THC weed, make sure it has 3 or 4 or 5% CBD if you're not going to get a 10% THC, 10% CBD. But ideally in the wild, there are more balanced measures. This whole sort of journey into high THC weed is great, but you really want to have some CBD with it to have the sort of longevity of the experience, so that you can use it weekly. You don't want to get into the cycle of just nailing the high THC weed, getting some sort of psychological issues, because that's the only thing you do. Just like it's okay to do anything once or twice a week. Same with the weed. I wouldn't advocate for young people who don't have a medical necessity to get into dosing THC around the clock. Because until you're 25, your brain's still growing, and it can affect, as it's called, brain morphology, the way the brain structures itself. But given that kids are nailing opiates and alcohol and all sorts of other things, we need to get rid of fuckheadery culture, that binge drinking and ingesting too many substances. And if people know this idea of the gateway effect, so everyone's worried about what's the gateway drug, turns out it's alcohol. But then the inverse of that is the substitution effect. So in places like America, where they have medical marijuana or cannabis access programs, basically the junkies, they can access cannabis, so they use less gear. The alcoholics, they're not always just using the alcohol, they're trying a bit of cannabis. So all in all, you have less deaths as a result of overdose from those substances. And then things like driving, right, they've shown that there's less road traffic accidents in places where they have access to medical cannabis, so you have less admissions into hospitals. So it's win-win for all of society. People aren't getting stuck in cycles of addiction with opiates and this kind of thing. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, and I often regularly do. I'm wearing shorts, so I'm a bit cold, so I'll probably have to go. But any questions? We've got a Facebook group,
saying, can you get
Medical
paranoid?
Marijuana UK. Add us, join us, message it, and I will answer any questions. But what's the question?
Can you get paranoid from smoking weed? Is there any side effects or anything?
CBD modulates paranoia.
Well, yeah. I mean,
is there any bad side effects? Obviously, that we're promoting weed, but is there any bad side effects that comes from smoking weed? Or
well, are there bad effects that come from smoking weed? I mean, that depends on the individual's constitution. What do they hope to achieve from if you want to sort of run a marathon, then don't obviously smoke a fat joint beforehand. That might affect your time. But on the whole,
people in here saying people die from weed, but they've already proved that.
Use responsibly. It's a very safe drug, relatively. It's considerably safer than alcohol, a legal comparator, and at the end of the day, it's not a neurotoxin. Alcohol's a neurotoxin. It's going to destroy your brain and melt it, whereas cannabis is not.
People can find out straight away how many people have been dying from weed simply by just searching the statistics online.
Google it. Yeah.
Just Google it. Don't go off what your grandma told you and assume that all this is true. Man. We need to encourage people to do their own fact checking.
Weed is your friend.
And also, don't get so obsessed with smoking.
Can you get paranoid?
You can eat it.
Saying, tinctures, but they keep saying you get paranoid from smoking weed. Can you get paranoid from smoking weed?
Yes, you can get paranoid if you ingest too high a dose. It's a bit like, can you be sick from drinking alcohol? Yeah, if you drink 2 litres of vodka, everyone's going to get sick. If you have too much cannabis for you and you don't usually have that amount, then as we just said, it's too much. If you have too much of anything, it's never a good thing. You can get paranoid.
People are getting into smoking, if people are just getting into smoking cannabis, they're smoking
too hard.
Extremely high THC strains.
The real
and then they're taking
hard.
big totes on this and they're getting really paranoid because they're not ready for this. This is why we're advocating you must include CBD in your genetics.
Yeah, learn
CBD
about what's going on. There's 100 cannabinoids. Don't get so hyped
Sosa
about
said
this
her granny
one
just told her to
cannabinoid.
pass the Rizna.
Yeah, nice. And also terpenes as well. Like, learn about the sort of interrelation, the interplay between terpenes and cannabinoids. They have a synergistic effect. Everyone knows that couch lock, beta-mycene. If that's in a strain, it's probably going to bring you to the floor. If you have sort of maybe some limonene or something that's found in citrus fruits, that's going to be a bit more uppy. So just basically understand that it's a very complex thing. A phytochemical, 500 molecules might be present in a really well-grown medicinal strain. Some of those compounds you don't need to ingest in high amounts, but those cannabinoids, the things that we're really interested, these are medicinal substances recognized the world over. This is kind of the paradigm that we need to move to, seeing it as a medicine rather than as some sort of like recreational drug.
So is weed a drug or medicine?
Is what, sorry?
Is weed a drug or medicine?
Well, so if you look into it, you have things like legislation around food, you have legislation around drugs, food supplements. These are sort of man-made distinctions, right? So whether something is a drug, right, or a food, or if you prefer a medicine, something called the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, they establish what the therapeutic effect is, and there's a 10% leeway and another 10%. At 80% of an effective medical dose, that's the maximum amount that people can sell as a food supplement. So basically, if it's too good, it stops being... Also, the other way to look at it is drugs take the body out of balance to help bring the body back into balance, whereas food is just trying to bring the body back into balance. So you can Wikipedia that stuff, right? You know the difference between a drug and a food. But cannabis is all of it. You can have it as salad, the leaves. It's very similar to like rocket or kale. It's a leafy green, full of chlorophyll. If you're just interested in the flowers, you know, these are medicinal. They are medicines. And if you look in the dictionary, drug and medicine, you know, the definitions, there are some overlap. So really what we need to get out of our heads is the idea that drugs are bad, as promoted by South Park. You know, the whole... We go to Boots, it's a drug store, but there's medicines inside of there. So what, on the one hand we're telling everyone don't do drugs, but on the other hand we're selling everyone absolutely shitloads of drugs. So learn the difference between drugs that are net negative versus drugs that are positive, right? So some drugs you can see it, within a few weeks of use they destroy people, lives, communities. Other drugs you can use them responsibly.
Is weed addictive?
And
They keep saying weed's addictive. Is weed addictive?
Well, I mean, so there's a difference between addicting, right? Addictive, things that cause physical dependency, things that cause habituation, and then there's a sort of relative scale, right? With things like crack and heroin and alcohol being at the top, these are fairly addictive. And then things at the bottom, sugar, things like weed. Weed is not really that...
That's the biggest addiction.
Addictive. But, you know, if you've got psychological issues and you want to smoke weed all day to escape them, then, you know,
it's a lot safer than drinking lots of alcohol.
It is a lot safer than getting into heroin and maybe dying in 6 weeks. But, of course, you can then end up being addicted and wanting to have the joint and not necessarily needing it and all that kind of thing. But it's not addictive in the way that you're going to end up in a gutter needing it 24 hours a day in the way that crack or heroin is. So, you know, in a sense, we need to elevate the level of discussion and discourse around what things like drugs and addiction and medicines and who's responsible for our health and when do we go to a doctor? Is it when we're really sick, or are we trying to prevent sickness from arising? You know, preventative versus curative.
Is cooking weed in your food good for your health?
Of course it is. By all means, get that bud, heat it up for 110 minutes to 110 degrees so that you decarboxylate it. You turn the THC acid, right, as it's found in the plant, into THC, which is the stuff that people like. So put it in the oven, 110 minutes, 110 degrees, and then you can sprinkle it on your food, or you can put it in some olive oil or some butter and perform a basic crude home extraction.
Reduce the dosage, because when you eat cannabis, it's 5 times more potent inside the body.
Okay.
Because some of the metabolites of the cannabinoids, they themselves are psychoactive or exert a medicinal effect. So yeah, anyway, hope that answers some of the questions, and we'll be more than happy to maybe next week come back, and if people have any longer questions or anything they think about over the week, we'll be more than happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, man said, Dawn Rushton said cheese, weed on toast.
Yeah, I mean, you know, cheese is a great strain, skunk's a great strain, there's so many great strains. Don't get so obsessed about the name of a strain, because in a sense it's fucking meaningless. Do get obsessed about the terpene profile, the cannabinoid profile, what's going on inside the plant, and you can't know that by something being called Alaskan Thunderfuck or Wedding Cake or some bullshit name that Lil Wayne's cooked up to make loads of money out of some strain or something. So yeah, learn what's going on, the cannabinoid and terpene profile. Boom!
Come on. Hey, big up yourself, man.
You as well.
Good night, brother.
Big up, bro.
Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
We just listen to
Content
COE.
over everything.
Come on. Gang. All right.